As Evelyn Reed, the silent guardian of the skies, slowly walked through the dimly lit corridors of Fort Carson Military Air Base, no one ever really noticed her. Her graying hair neatly tied in a bun, and every line on her face told a story of a life well lived and tough years gone by. Dressed in her faded civilian overcoat and comfortable shoes, even the few who knew her just called her Old Miss Evelyn. No one had any idea she once commanded the skies with an iron will. Every Tuesday, just like today, Evelyn came to dust the old shelves of the airport museum. With a damp cloth in hand, she gently polished the glass of the antique radar screens and communication gear, her eyes never leaving those lifeless displays. Each button, every dial whispered to her from the past. Young, tech-savvy military personnel would politely nod when they saw her, sometimes even jokingly asking, "Still landing planes in your dreams, Grandma?" Evelyn would just give a slight smile in return, keeping silent. They had no clue that Evelyn Reed didn't just land planes. She tamed storms, saw the unseen, and made the impossible happen. They didn't know that every old device came alive in her hands. In Evelyn's eyes, there was a depth beyond the present, an order only she could understand. That day, the sky hosted an unexpected guest. Since early morning, heavy dark clouds had been gathering over Fort Carson from the west. Meteorologists had warned of a sudden severe storm, but no one could have predicted the chaos it would bring or the new chapter it would open in Evelyn's life. In the air traffic control tower, Lieutenant Sarah Jensen, a young, by-the-book controller, nervously stared at the complex weather data on her screens. Modern systems were glitching, wind sensors were sending frantic signals, and visibility was rapidly dropping. "Damn it," Sarah muttered. "All the indicators are going crazy. We can't trust anything." Blake Evans, a young airman standing next to Sarah, chuckled mockingly. "Maybe we should check out old Evelyn's old-school maps, Lieutenant. She knows how to read a storm." Sarah frowned. "Shut up, Evans. This isn't the time for jokes."
The tower windows rattled with the raging wind. Rain lashed violently against the glass, reducing visibility to zero. The main radar screen went dark, then displayed strange, meaningless patterns. Communication with Command Central was cut. "Tower communication is down!" a technician yelled. "Backup systems are offline too!" Panic quickly spread through the tower. Several military cargo planes and transport helicopters were stuck in the airspace. The pilots' radio voices were getting lost in static, their desperation echoing in the air. It was total chaos. Meanwhile, in the dimly lit corner of the airport museum, Evelyn Reed carefully watched the old radar screen she was cleaning. The museum was dark due to a power outage, but the roar of the storm outside reached even here. Her eyes, under the flickering emergency light, followed the faint lines on that old screen. Those lines were actually a map of the real world outside, a world that modern systems couldn't see, but her eyes could easily read. With the cloth in her hand, she gently pressed a button. The old machine hummed to life, picking up a faint radio frequency in the middle of the storm. She heard a weak, crackling voice. "This is Bravo 7, fuel critical. We're lost. Repeat, we're lost." This voice took Evelyn back years, to the scorching heat of Vietnam. Just like now, the sky back then had been engulfed in chaos. Flashback. Vietnam, 1971. Young Evelyn, drenched in sweat, sat at the radio in an old, noisy tower. "Cobra 2, this is Eagle's Nest. Enter the Eastern Line. I repeat, Eastern Line. You'll see, there's a gap behind the fog screen." Commanders had been skeptical of her words, questioning her maps. But Evelyn saw with her eyes, heard with her ears. And at that moment, just like now, when the sky turned into hell and every modern system failed, only her fingers, remembering a dance long forgotten, would take the steps that would save hundreds of lives.
End of flashback. Evelyn's eyes returned to the dimness of the museum at Fort Carson. The static-filled voice from the old radio in her hand belonged to the pilot of the Bravo 7 cargo plane. A determined expression appeared on Evelyn's face. Years of experience and the desperate situation pushed her into action. She quickly got up from her seat and headed out of the museum towards the air traffic control tower, which was being hit by the full force of the storm. The wind tried to push her back. The rain felt like a solid wall. But she kept going despite everything, as if an invisible force was calling her. When Evelyn reached the tower door, the guards tried to stop her. "Ma'am, you can't go in! This area is dangerous right now!" Colonel Thomas Miller, the base commander, was shouting at a panicked Lieutenant Sarah Jensen. "Can't we reach the planes yet? What's wrong with these systems?" Evelyn slipped past the guards and walked in. Lieutenant Jensen rolled her eyes when she saw her. "For God's sake, what is this woman doing here? Get her out!" Evelyn went to the colonel. "Commander, I can help you. Your systems aren't working, but mine are." Colonel Miller gave the old woman a condescending look. "Are you kidding, ma'am? This isn't a game." Evelyn showed him the old radio in her hand. "I made contact with Bravo 7. They're on my frequency." The colonel looked at the radio in surprise. Sarah Jensen laughed. "This has to be a joke. You can't do anything with that old radio." Right at that moment, the storm rattled the tower windows, and the crackling voice rose from Evelyn's radio. "Bravo 7, this is Fort Carson. Lost communication with the tower. Help!" Evelyn's eyes never left that old radio. "This is Bravo 7, fuel critical. We're lost. Repeat, we're lost." This voice solidified the determined expression on Evelyn's face. Colonel Miller turned to Evelyn in shock. "How is this possible? All our communication channels are down." Evelyn took a step towards him. "My channels are open, Colonel, and you have to trust me." Sarah Jensen was still caught between shock and doubt. "Impossible! With this old tech?" Evelyn handed her the radio. "Nothing is impossible, Lieutenant. There are just paths you haven't tried." Evelyn reached for the blank airspace map on the table. It was an old map, its edges worn, some parts yellowed. Her fingers skillfully traced the lines on the map. She closed her eyes, as if inside the plane, and at that moment, when Evelyn's silent past suddenly became everyone's only hope, no one could have guessed who this woman really was. Suddenly, Airman Blake Evans noticed one of the control panel screens flicker back to life. "Colonel, a screen is on, but this isn't our system." On the screen, a weak but clear signal from the frequency Evelyn mentioned appeared. This signal showed the location of the lost cargo plane, Bravo 7. Hope and surprise appeared on Colonel Miller's face. How can this be possible?" Sergeant David McMillan, the base's experienced technician, approached Evelyn skeptically. "How did you get that signal? That radio that contacted you?" Mac's expression seemed to suggest he sensed something about Evelyn's past. He stared into Evelyn's eyes silently. Evelyn just smiled. "Some things, Sergeant, are found not with the newest technology, but with the oldest instincts." Evelyn leaned over the blank map on the command table. Young controllers stared at her in amazement, following her every move. Evelyn used her pen to mark the Bravo 7 plane caught in the storm. Then, on the map, she began drawing a thin line, showing a silent, narrow passage through the storm. "We'll use this corridor," she said calmly. "It's the storm's weakest point. The wind cuts there, and visibility improves." Sarah Jensen looked at Evelyn in disbelief. "Even drones couldn't get in there. How can you be sure?" Evelyn kept smiling. "Sometimes the newest technology can't see what an old pair of eyes can." Her eyes lingered on the lines on the map. It was like this in Vietnam, too. Flashback. Vietnam, 1971. Evelyn, as a young pilot, was stranded in a stormy night mission running critically low on fuel. All the cockpit indicators were going wild, and communication with the tower was cut. At that moment, an old map in her hand and her instincts helped her find a passage no one else could see, pulling her back from the brink of death. She flew her plane through a narrow, dangerous mountain pass, landing in a silent valley within the storm. There, she found a small, abandoned airstrip, not even marked on maps. This was proof of her survival and her ability to see the unseen. Evelyn's eyes returned to the map at Fort Carson. The thin drops of sweat on her forehead gave away her intense concentration. Colonel Miller, shaking off his surprise, turned to Evelyn with determination. "Colonel, is this safe? Hundreds of lives are at stake." Evelyn locked eyes with Colonel Miller. "Colonel, there's nothing safe in war, but this is our best shot." The colonel took a deep breath and turned to Sarah Jensen. "Lieutenant Jensen, follow Miss Reed's instructions to the letter." Sarah hesitated. Her entire career had been about following rules and protocols. Now she had to follow the instructions of a retired civilian, an old woman at that. Blake Evans watched in astonishment. "I can't believe this." Sarah began relaying Evelyn's instructions in a shaky voice. "Bravo 7, you are receiving new instructions from Fort Carson Tower. Do you copy?" The crackling voice from the radio cleared. "Bravo 7, copy. Awaiting instructions." Evelyn, with her eyes on the map, began giving commands. "Change your heading to 285 degrees. Proceed on this heading for 2 minutes. Then descend 15 degrees for 30 seconds. Sarah meticulously wrote down and repeated Evelyn's every word. Each command flowed from Evelyn's lips like a secret, but her voice echoed throughout the room. Max silently watched Evelyn. As an experienced technician, he could appreciate the knowledge behind these old-school methods. Bravo 7's pilot began following Evelyn's commands over the radio. "Heading to 285 degrees. Descending." A tense silence filled the tower. Everyone held their breath, hoping Evelyn's instructions would conquer the storm. Sarah couldn't hide her astonishment. This woman's foresight seemed to be one step ahead of the storm. Evelyn, right at the peak of the storm, gave another command over the radio. "Now, that's it. Reduce your speed and turn 180 degrees. Don't lose your nerve." The pilot hesitated. "But this means going into the heart of the storm." Evelyn's voice became even clearer. "I know, but that's the eye of the storm. Your only way out is there. Trust me." Colonel Miller took the radio from Evelyn's hand. "Bravo 7, this is Colonel Miller from command. Follow Miss Reed's instructions right now." The pilot took a deep breath and obeyed. The plane dived into the deepest part of the storm. Evelyn had a tense expression, but her eyes were firm. A few minutes later, the voice from the radio became clearer. "Bravo 7, we made it. We're in the eye of the storm. Visibility is clear. We see light." In the tower, everyone looked at each other in amazement. Evelyn's voice calmly rose from the radio. "Maintain your speed, Bravo 7. You're on the right track. They'll meet you shortly." A few minutes later, a faint but distinct signal appeared on Fort Carson Air Base's radar screen. The Bravo 7 plane had made it through the storm and was heading towards the base. Colonel Miller turned to Evelyn. His face held an expression of deep respect and admiration. "Ms. Reed, how did you do this? I've been serving at this base for years, but I've never witnessed anything like it." Evelyn smiled faintly. "Experience, Colonel. And sometimes, to see certain things, you just need to listen." Sarah Jensen came up to Evelyn. Her face was a mix of shame and appreciation. "Ms. Reed, I was very unfair to you. I'm sorry." Evelyn gently touched the young woman's shoulder. "It's all right, Lieutenant. Everyone makes mistakes. What matters is learning from them." Blake Evans and the other soldiers also looked at Evelyn with respect. None of them saw her as old Ms. Evelyn anymore. Bravo 7 safely landed on the base's main runway. The cargo plane and the soldiers inside were safe. Evelyn stood to the side, a silent witness to the victory. Colonel Miller walked up to her. "Ms. Reed, this event needs to be in the reports. Your name should be written in gold letters in Fort Carson's history." Evelyn shook her head. "No, Colonel. My name isn't necessary. What matters is that our mission was successfully completed." The colonel looked at Evelyn with admiration. "But how? How did you stay so calm? And with such an old radio, how did you establish such clear communication?" Evelyn's eyes were fixed on the sky outside the tower, where the storm was slowly dissipating. "In war, Colonel, the most valuable thing is calmness. And sometimes the oldest tools show the clearest path." Mac approached Evelyn. "Ms. Reed, I've never encountered you before, but I know. Someone like you is impossible to forget. There must be other stories in your past." Evelyn looked into Mac's eyes. Her face held an expression of years of weariness, but also wisdom. "Everyone has a story to tell, Sergeant. Some just wait for the right time." Mac smiled. "And some stories speak louder than words." Evelyn slowly walked towards the tower door. The guard saluted her respectfully. She responded with a slight nod. Outside, the storm had calmed, and the first rays of sunlight were piercing through the clouds. Whispers of Evelyn's name rose from all over the base. She was no longer old Miss Evelyn, but Hero Evelyn. But she continued on her way silently, ignoring these titles. As Evelyn walked towards the base exit, Colonel Miller and Sarah Jensen stopped her. "Ms. Reed," the colonel said, "would you like to come back to the base? Your expertise would be very helpful." Sarah added, "We can offer you your old position, or even better. We need someone like you." Evelyn turned to them. "My mission is over, Colonel. Let this young generation find its own way. Trust them." Her eyes scanned Sarah and Blake. Their faces no longer held condescension, but admiration. Evelyn smiled faintly, as if bidding them farewell, and walked out of the base gate. Behind her, she left saluting soldiers and a base looking at her in awe. As Evelyn walked slowly, the first rays of sun hit her face. As Evelyn left Fort Carson, she left behind a completely transformed base, a silent witness to the storm. Her story would spread in whispers through the tower's corridors, inspiring young soldiers. She returned to her job at the airport museum, but now she was no longer an ordinary cleaner, but a silent legend. A month later, Colonel Miller was eating in the base mess hall when he overheard a young soldier showing a picture of Evelyn. "This woman is a total legend," the young soldier whispered. "She taught us how to beat the storm." Colonel Miller smiled. Some lessons are best learned in silence. From that day on, the air traffic control tower at Fort Carson didn't forget the value of old radios and analog maps. Evelyn's stories spread like a legend by word of mouth. She would remain a silent guardian of the skies, a forgotten hero. But most importantly, Evelyn had shown everyone that being a hero isn't just about being recognized. True heroism is doing what's right and quietly stepping aside. One evening, Evelyn sat at home, looking out the window. The sky was full of stars. Memories of her time as a pilot came to mind. She felt the same peace she had felt that day when she found that narrow corridor in the storm. She was alone, but not lonely. The skies were with her. This story is a testament to silent heroes, invisible sacrifices, and underestimated talents. It reminds us that sometimes the greatest strength lies within a humble soul, far from any showmanship. To help more people discover powerful human stories like this, please remember to subscribe to our channel and like this video. In the comments section, share your own stories of silent heroes you've witnessed. Perhaps our next story will be inspired by yours. because some stories speak louder than words.